Hey, what's up? This is Odolena from Odolena Digital, and today I'm going to talk about China and US trade war. And welcome to my channel. Every Sunday I post a new video, so my specialties are book reviews, technology and courses, but today I'm going to talk about a topic which has been very interesting for me, and it's politics. So since recently I've been reading a little bit more about politics and exploring some things that are happening right now, and the China and US trade war is something very interesting. It's actually impacting all of us, not only these two countries. It's something that's happening at global scale. It's very, very interesting to follow, and just wanted to clarify a few things. I know the topic is very hot. I know that a lot of people have different opinions, and pretty much everybody judges President Trump on what he's doing. I just wanted to kind of clarify a few facts and kind of see the motivation behind the whole thing. So first of all, when we start talking about the trade war between China and the United States, there are a couple of things that we have to explain. So first, the word tariff. So we keep hearing tariffs, what are tariffs? So tariff is basically, let's say you want to import something in my country and I ask you to pay an extra on it. Why? Because let's say in your country it's super cheap to produce this thing. You come there and you compete with my local producers. You make your product is of course preferred because everybody wants something cheap, they want a bargain. So my producers are suffering. They have to lower the wages, or they have to start exporting their jobs in order to compete with you. And this is what's been happening in the United States for a while now. Basically they've been importing very cheap goods for large quantities. It's a huge market. Everybody likes cheap stuff. However, the US companies, in order to compete, have exported a lot of their production abroad, and therefore a lot of very important jobs which support actually people's incomes have been gone outside of the United States. So this is the reason of introducing a tariff, just fairly making sure that let's say you import European cars, so Mercedes in Europe costs different from Mercedes in the United States. Apple in the United States costs different than Apple that you buy in other countries. If I buy Apple in Bulgaria, it's gonna be super expensive. If I go to the United States, it's actually I'm going to pay less. So this is how it works. There are international tariffs that you bring in certain goods and they cost more. Just so that you compete and you don't compete with the local ones, or you compete fairly. Second term we have to explain is the deficit. So the deficit is the difference between what you export and what you import. So if you are exporting more than you're importing, then you don't have deficit. But if it's the opposite, let's say you are importing much more than you're exporting, you are minus, so you have a deficit. Basically, you are buying more than you're producing, essentially. And this is what has been happening between the United States and the rest of the world. So the United States is importing about $3.1 trillion and is exporting $2.5 trillion. So they have a deficit of $621 billion in total. So this is the difference. Well, you say, well, what's the problem with that? Well, Americans like to buy things, they like shopping, they like spending, they're importing a lot of cheap stuff, they have the money to buy them, they have bigger incomes than probably most of the countries in the world, and they're exporting less because their goods cost more to produce, they have higher wages there, so it costs you more to actually get out on the market and to sell their products. What's the problem with that? Well, that's the main problem, is that there is a big imbalance into who they are importing from and where this deficit is coming from. So 539 billion of this import is coming from China. So this is about 17% import coming only from China. I said, okay, well, that's quite a bit, but China is a big producer as well. Well, the United States imports in China only 120 billion. So this is 4.8%. So very little compared to what China imports is the United States importing in China. So there is already a disbalance. But look at that, it's becoming even more interesting. And I thank to Patrick Bet-David, who actually created a video about this and made it very clear for me. So look at that. Basically, from this deficit of $621 billion, the whole difference between import and export in the United States, 419 billion of this deficit is to China. So 67% of this difference is coming from Chinese products imported into the United States. So what this means is that basically the United States is importing way too much in China and losing a lot of jobs due to the cheaper cost of production elsewhere, so that and companies in the United States can compete with this huge cheap import. Having explained that, you might still be thinking, well, they've kind of deserved it. Like, I mean, what's the problem after all, Dolena, if China becomes a bigger one? Like, there's been always changes in history, like there've been one country becoming a bigger one, the biggest power is changing, it's always changing, it cannot be the United States all over the time. Yeah, but when we look at the shift of power, it also, when we come look at the competition between countries, it's not only about economic superiority and kind of income of the people and about prestige of being number one. It's also about ideology. And let's not forget that China is a communist country. Well, so this beautiful YouTube channel that we are watching now, it wouldn't be possible in China because they will ban me and probably put me in jail. I'm coming from Bulgaria, which used to be a communist country. I never lived in a communist regime. I was born after that, but I know from people that you were not even allowed to say a joke about the leader of the country or anybody close to their family, just because it was dangerous for you. You could lose your job, you could end up into some working camp, or terrible things could happen to you. China has a little bit different regime, but it's still pretty strict. And actually, this is the reason why so many people are trying to immigrate from the country. Actually, you see that in America, it has a positive immigration. So it's the country that takes the highest amount of immigrants in the world, always. No matter what Trump says, no matter what their administration laws are doing and kind of the bans that they're setting up, they are getting a lot of immigrants in the United States because everybody wants to go there. Why nobody wants to go to China? Well, the reason is because the government there has different ideology. Basically, they tell people what to do, people do it, and in kind of like becoming the number one power, it's the way of China saying that this is the way of doing things better. Like, this democracy thing is kind of weak because they cannot compete with us. So what we are doing is the right thing. So if we have this kind of disbalance, it means a lot of things about ideology and about what kind of big part of the Western world is built on is the power of democracy, of the power of society and freedom of speech, which is what is kind of our biggest value here, and what is not existent in China. You might say, like, well, in the United States, whatever happens, it goes immediately in the media. So Chinese governments don't need to spy too much. They know everything what's happening. Whereas in China, the media is completely controlled by the country. So basically, they can do whatever they want. We'll be still clueless about their intentions. This great plan made in China 2025. Which is something official. So if you live in a communist country, they have these 5-year plans where the country decides, the government decides what they want to achieve in 5 years, and you have to basically oblige, and all the companies and all the factories are trying to produce and overproduce or make the 5 years into 2 years in order to meet the requirements of the country. So China has such a beautiful plan to become number one power, and they have said it officially that this is actually what they're aiming for. So this plan involves several different actions, which we're gonna look at, and actually they make a lot of sense on why America is so worried about them becoming number one power. So first of all, Chinese government pressures companies to adjust to their vision for 2025. So there is a huge push on companies to use innovation and technology and to be competitive on that sector. So there is a lot of research. So companies like Huawei, which has been a subject of another story with the United States, when US actually banned American companies doing any business with Huawei, and US citizens were warned not to buy or to use any Huawei devices. And they have their reasons to do so. There are some really good video from Patrick but David again on this topic. I'm gonna share a link here. But the reason is that China is investing huge amounts of money in research and development. So companies like Huawei actually invest in more research and development than Apple and Samsung. A little bit less than Google, so we're still on the safe side, but still they have cheaper workforce. So actually what they're investing in, let's say in researchers' time, might actually be much more compared to the investment of an American company, just because researchers in the US and in other countries cost more than in China. So actually research and technology has been huge focus on this plan. Chinese government is giving a lot of subsidies, so 300 billion investment in subsidies for companies to adjust to this vision. Then foreign investment and acquisition, so buying semiconductor companies and researching their technology. So this has been also a major focus of China, is acquiring companies. So only in 2016, 45 billion Chinese acquisitions in the United States. So these are companies that they get acquired and by Chinese people, and they take trade secrets, they understand how they're working, and bring the production in China for cheaper. So this is also quite boring, especially when it comes to the battle for technology. So the battle who is going to have the next 5G network. China has announced that they will going to have 5G next year. Everybody else in the world has announced that they will be ready with the technology in 5 years. So 5 years is a lot of time when it comes to technology, and having access to 5G is something that is actually going to develop a huge amount of money for the country that has it first in licenses and in job creation. It's calculated that will be boosting massively the GDP of the country that has 5G. So this is going to be something really major, and it's happening next year. So this is quite worrying. Also, China has been mobilizing state-backed companies to participate in this initiative. So they have companies which are owned or kind of backed up by the state. So kind of like investing in companies that have the resources to dig into what Chinese government wants. So they are doing this as well. And finally, which is something I wasn't aware of, and it's absolutely stunning and really interesting, and this has been the rule actually for a while now, is something called forced transfer agreements. So whenever you want to do actually business in China, it turns out that you have to share your trade secrets. You cannot do business in China if you're not sharing your trade secrets with the government. And this is one of the main reasons why there hasn't been Google in China for a while, that we don't want to share our secrets with them. But that's another topic, and I don't want to dig into this. But like, for example, we bought recently a Huawei laptop, and we opened the box. It looks like an Apple box. The design is exactly like an Apple computer. Then you open it, the packaging, everything is perfectly copied in a little bit cheaper paper and maybe a little bit cheaper details here and there. But the keyboard, the screen, the colors, everything is matching how a MacBook looks. So Apple has huge share in China in terms of market and a lot of production there. So they are a company which is actually has been suffering a lot from the trade wars, and is not maybe the perfect decision for them to have this trade wars happening. However, it's happening for a bigger purpose. So having all this outlined actually makes it clear that China is on its way to compete with technology with the United States and to become a global power, and they have a clear plan on doing it, and they are acting upon it. Something else which is super important to mention here: United States owes to China 1.3 trillion debt. So actually, this is quite interesting that China is the biggest debt provider for the United States, and thinking about these trade wars and everything that's happening, like, you would be surprised, like, why doesn't China say, like, well, you owe us money, like, why are you giving us tariffs now and like bothering our export that has been working so well so far, and you're bothering our plan of becoming #1 power in the world. You owe us money, like, who do you think you are? Well, the thing is that actually, if, let's say, China decides to sell its debt and to basically screw over the United States, who is going to suffer most? China, because huge market as the United States, if it collapses, then China doesn't have a place to sell. So it's very, very important. So both countries actually need each other a lot. So how would this trade war look like in the future? Well, most likely it will be kind of a game of who lasts longer. The country that has the highest resources, the most stable economy, and is able to last longer, is be the one which is going to actually win the war. There have been a lot of things when it comes to China, as a lot of their richest elite has been trying to leave the country. This country has been reporting year over year really stable, very low unemployment rates. However, it looks very strange because it never changes. So there are a lot of doubts about how accurately they are reporting their reality in the country. So according to actually Chinese sources, about 70% of the water in North China is polluted. It's not suitable for human touch. People are leaving the big cities. Whoever is able to afford education abroad is trying to get education abroad. Actually, United States colleges got insurance in case Trump bans Chinese students coming to the United States. So Chinese students, the children of the well-off Chinese, are actually a very, very important asset to the United States economy and to American business schools and schools in general. So both countries need each other. And in a way, a lot of things that China presents that they're really beautiful are not so great, as some of whoever has some possibility to actually escape this country has done it. And a lot of how people live there is not the best way, and not that many people are aspiring to immigrate in China. Whereas the United States, even with all its problems with Trump and with all the debt and everything that has happened in the recent years, is still a major place where everybody wants to immigrate to. So when you compare both countries, you can see, like, maybe each of them has its strong points and each of them is capable of winning the war, but we don't know. We shall wait and see. This is all from me for now. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to my channel and I'll be back with a new video next week.